All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another breakdown, preview, and prediction video. Rolly Romero defending his WBA welterweight world title against Teofimo Lopez. Rolly Romero coming off by far his career best victory over Ryan Garcia. That was in May of 2025. Unbelievable. It's been so long since we've seen him in the ring. Up against Teofimo Lopez, Teofimo Lopez coming off the back of a devastating loss. All right, losing his world titles, and in that fashion, which could only be described as an absolute spanking to the hands of Shakur Stevenson, losing his world titles and now making the move up from super lightweight to welterweight. And it's probably the right place to start. When we talk about this division, it most definitely favors Rolly Romero, and I don't think there's any other way of looking at it. I think for Rolly Romero, you saw the change in both Rolly Romero's physicality, but also the way he handles himself in the ring from the move up from those lower divisions into welterweight. Like, he looks a completely different fighter. Back looks massive. The arms look massive. And not only are we looking at Rolly Romero, who's not really a technical boxer. For me, he's more of a puncher. All right. He's more of a puncher than he is a technical boxer. So the fact that you are got much more muscle mass, you got much more power in your punches is going to help him in this division anyway. But for me, it's actually more about the punch resistance. You saw there was very minimal punch resistance in those lower divisions. You saw what happens when he got hit by Tank Davis. You saw even more what happened when he got hit by Isaac Pitbull Cruz. Like, that was so early on in that fight when he first got hurt against Pitbull Cruz. Since moving up, you are seeing a better, not only physical Rolly Romero, but I think it's just a more comfortable, a more confident Rolly Romero in this division. For Teofimo Lopez, it's a step up. It's not a massive step up, granted, but it is a step up. And we've seen some fighters stumble on their first step up from super lightweight to welterweight. Most recently, probably Liam Paro on his first fight from super lightweight to the welterweight division. You know, coming off the back of a loss, comes in against David Papo, and he struggles with the power in that first fight. Doesn't come to his second fight against Lewis Crocker that we see him actually adjust properly to the weight. And when you're talking about Teofimo Lopez moving up, and he's not just moving up into welterweight to take on, you know, a technical boxer, he's moving up to take on a puncher, a guy that is relying on his power. So it is a massive risk for Teofimo Lopez. The other part I want to talk about is the fact that, like I said, Rolly Romero last fought against Ryan Garcia in May of 2025. Now, it's something I don't particularly like in fighters. For Teofimo Lopez, I know he's coming off the back of a loss, but at least he's been active. He's been in the ring. He's going to learn. He's going to grow from that experience. He's at least been in the ring. There's no chance of him coming into this fight and looking rusty. Maybe he might be a little bit hesitant because of the way he lost his last fight. But for Rolly Romero, I mean, you get your career best win over Ryan Garcia. I want to see you back in the ring straight away. The fact that we're talking about that taking place in May, we're now in August, all that momentum that he would have carried on from that Ryan Garcia fight is gone. No momentum, and you're risking starting the fight rusty. You're looking at, you know, a risk of starting slow against a guy like Teofimo Lopez, who, when Teofimo Lopez is on, he's confident. When he wants it, we know the way he fights, front foot and all action. So you are risking that coming to this fight. I mean, for Rolly Romero, not only is it, you know, over 12 months since his last fight against Ryan Garcia, but go before that, Manuel Jaimes, that was in September of 2024. Since then till now, August of 2026, he's fought twice. Manuel Jaimes, Ryan Garcia. So 2 fights in 24 months. It's never, for me, the way to do things. But hey, if he comes in and he looks fine, it doesn't really matter. Now, when we talk about this fight and we break it down, I think both of these fighters have very similar flaws in their game. I do. Their attack is very different, and we're going to get to that. But I think for flaws in both of their games, it's very similar. For Teofimo Lopez, he looks unbelievable when things are going his way. When things are going his way, he looks very, very good. But as soon as things switch, he does start to look out of ideas. When it wasn't going right against George Kambosos Jr., him and his team looked lost.
Stop shifting him! You gotta hit him, bro! Let's go! You're gonna hate yourself. Take this round, Joe. Take this round.
When it wasn't going right against Shakur Stevenson, him and his team looked lost. Not only that, another flaw that I see in Teofimo Lopez's game is you see him eat a lot of counters. He eats a lot of counters. Like, it was a counter shot that dropped him against George Kambosos. It wasn't quite a counter. He was almost drawn onto a shot against Sandor Martin that dropped him early. Not the biggest knockdown you ever see, a bit soft, but still a knockdown in that fight, even against Shakur Stevenson. But we know how good Shakur Stevenson is, and I don't like really comparing Rolly Romero to Shakur Stevenson, but Shakur Stevenson, you can see how easily he was able to land counter shots on Teofimo Lopez, even Lomachenko. For me, later in that fight, Lomachenko grew into that fight, and he actually, something that Lomachenko did in that fight, which I think Rolly Romero can do in this fight, is you look at about round 8, round 9, Lomachenko gets a little bit nasty in that fight. Right, he starts trying to push Teofimo Lopez back. He starts grabbing. He starts doing a little bit of rabbit shots. He's fighting in close, all sort of brawling instincts that I think Rolly Romero, if he looks at that and sees the success that Lomachenko has, it's almost a bit of a game plan to say, all right, Teofimo Lopez isn't really comfortable when the fight gets nasty, when it's not this sort of fight that's going Teofimo Lopez's way. Now, for Rolly Romero, much the same. Rolly Romero, very, very attack heavy, a brawling fighter, but no technical ability, in my opinion, at all compared to Teofimo Lopez, which, look, there's benefits to both. You don't have to, not everybody has to look like Shakur. There's been plenty of fighters that don't look like Shakur Stevenson that have great amounts of success. So I'm not saying that at all. But for Rolly Romero, when you look at his flaws in his game, when he lets his hand fly, there is no regard for defense. There is zero regard. So if you are in the moment, you're watching what Rolly Romero does, there's plenty of openings to catch Rolly Romero out. Just like Gervonta Tank Davis did when he knocked him out in the 6th round. He drawed him onto a shot and bang, straight down the pipe. And it wasn't a one-off shot. If you watch that fight, Gervonta Tank Davis lands over and over straight left hands. All right, so there's a definite flaw in the defense of Rolly Romero. And I think Teofimo Lopez, with his skill, all right, and the way that he fights technically, he will be more than able to find those holes in Rolly Romero's defense. For Teofimo Lopez, not only is he quick and he's powerful, but he's also very, very crafty, and he'll be able to find those openings in Rolly Romero's defense. And like I said, Rolly Romero isn't the most technical fighter. He is almost a one-out fighter. It is, all right, we're going to do a few jabs, and then we're going to throw the big right hand, or we're going to throw that big left hook. I did like the way Rolly Romero was starting to mix in the bodywork against Ryan Garcia. I would have liked a little bit more, but when we talk about what both of these fighters do well, because that's probably the more make or break in this fight, because I think we both know, what their flaws are. For Teofimo Lopez, when I look at him and his strengths in this fight against Rolly Romero, I think Rolly Romero, because of his lack of technical ability, not the longest time in the game. I mean, you go back a few years ago when we saw the sparring footage between Teofimo Lopez and Rolly Romero. Rolly Romero was only in the sport for a couple of months, but you saw just how on top of Rolly Romero Teofimo Lopez was. Teofimo Lopez was feeling confident. He knew he was far, far superior than Rolly Romero. He was able to step on the gas, and he was just picking him apart. And although that was a few years ago, both fighters have grown since then. Like I said, Rolly Romero was only in the sport for a few years. I think you can take a lot out of that sparring footage, because for me, they're both going to get better from there. They're both going to improve. It's not just Rolly Romero who's going to get better. And has Rolly Romero done enough since then till now to, switch the tide, to really make a statement? I think Rolly Romero, in a technical battle against Teofimo Lopez, he's not going to win it. Teofimo Lopez will pick him apart if Rolly Romero tries to box him, because that's what Teofimo Lopez is good at. All right, he's very, very technical. He's very, very crafty. He's very, very quick. And on top of all that, I think Teofimo Lopez, when he's feeling confident and he starts mixing up his punches, a bit like that flying punch that he does to Josh Taylor, he starts becoming unorthodox. He starts becoming hard to work out, and it all sort of runs off that confidence for Teofimo Lopez. Teofimo Lopez is very, very good at the confidence. So what can Rolly Romero do to stop that confidence, stop what Teofimo Lopez was doing when they sparred all those years ago, when they come into this ring and Teofimo Lopez is trying to box him, picking him apart, ripping to the body, going upstairs, doing all the things that we know Teofimo Lopez is very, very good at. For Rolly Romero, I think Rolly Romero, if he comes into this fight to try and box Teofimo Lopez, he's on his way to a loss. He's on his way to a loss, and it won't be pretty. Rolly Romero needs to come into this fight and make it as ugly as physically possible, because I think that's the best way for Rolly Romero. We've seen it go both ways. We've seen Rolly Romero win ugly. We've also seen him lose ugly. Isaac Pitbull Cruz, though, a very different fighter to Teofimo Lopez. So I don't think you really have to worry about that. The most thing you have to worry about is being picked off by counters. And we know how good Teofimo Lopez is at counter punching. But I think it's a problem for both of them, the counter punching. So you can't focus too much on it when you're trying to do what you're trying to do. And for Rolly Romero, using your size, using your physicality, and using your power are the keys to victory in this fight. Like I said, Lomachenko had success late in that fight, making it ugly. And I think if Rolly Romero can make this fight ugly. If he can rip to the body, if he can make this just a nasty shit night for Teofimo Lopez, it'll go a long way to maybe stopping him with the power, but most definitely having a competitive edge in the decision. Now, when you look at Rolly Romero and the fight against Ryan Garcia, what I didn't particularly like about that fight for Rolly Romero was we're talking about Rolly Romero against a Ryan Garcia. Afterwards, everybody was saying how bad Ryan Garcia looked. Rolly Romero gets a knockdown in the second round, but we still look at two scorecards that read 116 to 112. For me, when you get that competitive edge, when you're in there with a fighter like that that's not really there, or you scored a knockdown early, for me, I want to see you press on the gas. I want to see you go out there and really make a statement in that. And that's what we were sort of waiting for from Rolly Romero in that fight against Ryan Garcia. And it didn't really happen. In fact, the 2 rounds after Ryan Garcia gets dropped, you'd probably say Ryan Garcia wins them back. All right, scoring some nice left hooks and looking competitive. It sort of goes wayward after that. But for Rolly Romero, for me, when Teofimo Lopez is on, when Teofimo Lopez is feeling confident, it's when he's at his best. It's when he's out of ideas and things aren't going his way that he starts to crumble. His team starts to crumble. Like I said, we saw it against Kambosos. We saw it against Shakur. So for Rolly Romero, you're almost saying, all right, what can you do to have the same impact you did against Ryan Garcia? Because you drop Teofimo Lopez early, you start inflicting that power, you start making him hesitant of what's coming back, the fight's going to be very, very different because Teofimo Lopez will not want to engage the way he normally does. Teofimo Lopez loves to run in and engage, throw lots of punches, and pick you apart. But that slows down rapidly when he starts not having success, like he did when he got caught by George Kambosos. He was all over Kambosos until he gets caught. Shakur Stevenson, as soon as Shakur Stevenson started to inflict that belter of a jab followed by that left hand and just keep him at distance, not letting him have any success, catching him with hooks, catching him with counters, Teofimo Lopez stopped throwing his hands because he knew that he was just getting picked apart, and Shakur Stevenson was able to ride off to a very wide decision. And that, for me, Rolly Romero needs to do. He needs to come in and he needs to inflict that power early. He needs to lower the confidence of Teofimo Lopez. He needs to maybe drop Teofimo Lopez, hurt him early to just say, all right, I've made my statement here. I'm going to be the front foot fighter. Because Teofimo Lopez on the front foot feeling good, your only way of victory is a counter that probably stops him. Because you're not going to win a decision with Teofimo Lopez on the front foot. You got to push him back. All right, so there's 2 ways for Rolly Romero. It's either knock him out with a counter or inflict some pain early, lower that confidence, and then do what you are good at. Rip into the body with those heavy shots. Setting up your big power punches with your nice jab. It was a better jab in that fight against Ryan Garcia than we have seen in the previous fight. For Teofimo Lopez is far the better boxer. All right. End of the day, you break it down. You look at the sparring footage from back then. You look at the fights that they've had till day. Teofimo Lopez is by far the better boxer out of him and Rolly Romero. And there's no question in that. For me, there is no question. You even look at the levels of competition that they've had. Rolly Romero has had 3 tough fights in his career, and 2 of them he's lost. 1 of them he beat Ryan Garcia. I don't want to discredit him too much, but Ryan Garcia was not there on the day, right? But you look, Tank Davis, massive fight, gets knocked out. Massive fight against Isaac People-Cruz, gets knocked out. For Teofimo Lopez, he's won some big fights, he's lost some big fights. He has, but he didn't get knocked out by Kambosos. He didn't get knocked out by Shakur Stevenson. He beats Josh Taylor. He beats Lomachenko. All right, he's got some great wins in his professional career. And when you compare the 2, for me, there is no doubt Teofimo Lopez is the better boxer. I don't see Teofimo Lopez stopping Rolly Romero. I'd be very, very surprised. Unless he gains a whole lot of power in this welterweight division, I don't see him. I see this fight going, Teofimo Lopez winning the fight by a UD. All right, that is my official prediction for this fight. I believe Teofimo Lopez, just a much, much superior boxer, much better technician. I don't believe Rolly Romero will be able to land his shots that he wants on Teofimo Lopez because he's too quick and defensively very, very sound. I think we forget about how good he is defensively because of that fight against Shakur Stevenson. Teofimo Lopez is a very, very good defensive fighter. He's a very good counterpuncher, but he's also very, very good on the attack. For me, Rolly Romero is just too one-dimensional. His best bet in this fight is going in there and hurting Teofimo Lopez with a big punch and either dropping him or knocking him out cold. And it's probably more the second. I think Rolly Romero's only way to victory in this fight is to stop Teofimo Lopez unless he scores a really early knockdown and Teofimo Lopez just goes into his shell because he can't handle the power, which is it's a possibility, but Rolly would first have to land that punch. For me, Teofimo Lopez comes in here, probably a little bit slower than we expect. Few feeling out rounds early. But once he starts getting into his groove, starts picking apart Rolly Romero, he will stride off to a UD victory. Look, Rolly Romero, he should be competitive in this fight. I don't think it'll be a blowout. I think some people are thinking Teofimo Lopez is going to run through him. I don't think that'll happen. I'm more saying Teofimo Lopez, just based off how good he is technically as a boxer, will outbox Rolly Romero over the course of 12 rounds, get a good UD, and progress into this welterweight division. Guys, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Who do you think is going to win and why? Are you backing Rolly Romero? I'm very, very intrigued to see what the percents are between Teofimo Lopez and Rolly Romero. For me, Teofimo Lopez, all right, it sounds simple, but at the end of the day, Teofimo Lopez is just a far superior technical boxer over Rolly Romero. And for me, skills pay the bills, and they're going to pay the bills here. He could get clocked by one. There's always the possibility that he gets clocked by one. I just don't see it happening. I don't see it landing. I think Teofimo Lopez is too alert and too quick and too skilled defensively for it to happen unless he gets caught out feeling a bit too overconfident like he did against George Kambosos Jr. Guys, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'm out of here. See ya!